The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. My name is Ray Arell. This is episode 19 of our live event and our podcast. It's brought to you by Agile Alliance. If you guys don't know who the Agile Alliance is, it's a nonprofit organization that's focused on helping people to deliver with Agile better. They run a number of different events around the world, as well as run a number of different initiatives, including this one, in order to help make those Agile adoptions go a little bit easier. Most of the people on this call have been either doing Agile for many moons or just getting started. So to get us started, we've crowdsourced a set of questions that are up on the agilealliance.org website. And today's first question is, are all Agile transformations in companies that are not under extreme economic or market stress, are they extremely slow? Who would like to get started with that? Steve, would you like to take a dive on that?
Well, I think Microsoft is an example that we know the chronology fairly well on. It began with one team in 2008, a couple of teams in 2009, 25 teams in 2010, 300 teams in 2011, and really set out to change the whole organization in 2014. So that's a 6-year transition, and that would be not unsurprising, I would say, in the other big organizations that I've seen. When you have a real transformation underway, this is not something you're going to do in a week or a month or a year. It's really a different way of doing things, and it just takes a while for everyone to absorb the new way of doing things and develop practices and grow things in an organic way within the organization. Those organizations that try to go faster, bring in a big firm, train everyone, do it all in a month or two. I've never seen any of those kind of change efforts actually work. They come to nothing, and then the firm wonders, well, what went wrong, and how do we start again?
Yeah, I mean, we saw the same thing at Intel Corporation. The original starting was back in 2000 I think it was 2003, and that was just probably about 75 people practicing Agile. And then slowly over time, and by the way, we were pushing against the corporate governance system, meaning that waterfall was the way of delivery. It was actually a written spec that said that you had to follow waterfall. So some of these individuals were secreted about running their Agile adoption. And then slowly, as those teams had success, then it was 5 Scrum teams, 20 Scrum teams, and then eventually, I think right now there are well over 2,000 Scrum teams that are running in the company, and a variety of other Agile. But most prominent pattern was Scrum and its practices.
Yeah, maybe to add one thought, and that is, as well, there seems to be a natural limit to Agile transformation, and this is with the top leader who still is supporting and understanding the mindset. If you have a company where on the top there's somebody who doesn't change himself, then obviously there's a limit what the others can do in terms of change, and that is sometimes perceived as being slow, but instead actually there might be a pretty structured and speedy change. So not about rushing. I agree with Steve here that rushing doesn't help at all to a certain point, and then at that point it gets stuck due to personal change challenges, and that's no matter how high up you are in the hierarchy, change in persons is always incremental, unless something really dramatic happens maybe. So that's one reason why you can't just switch people to do something totally different.
So do you think it's slow, or is it just the fact that it's just a journey that people are on, and that journey basically is something that it perceives that it's still going on after 5 years, but reality is it's still just evolving?
Well, I think that it depends on the team and the environment, because if the rate of change exceeds the ability to absorb the change, you have a dangerous situation and something will get compromised. And when that happens, you don't have what I value the most, which is the organic growth, which is people are self-organizing around the values, and they adopt as they see fit, right? That provides for engagement, and even if they make mistakes, they will be quick to recover from it. But if you have too much, they will feel disfranchised and they would not provide the engagement, which will really put in jeopardy your entire transformation. So the rate of change cannot exceed the absorption rate, which will be specific to how well the people work together. Are they stable, or they are in the constant flow and flux of change?
I've noticed a changing of the status quo within organizations that is, companies' current success. And, if we're having record sales months and everything's doing well, and then suddenly someone comes along and says, here's a better way of doing things. A lot of cold water gets thrown on that from people who just say that, hey, we're doing well. What's the reason? Why do we have to change? What are some of the methods that you would use to go off and help people to understand that we need to change?
Yeah, one thought to this is definitely example. If you want to make people who are in a quite comfortable situation change something, show them that it changes for the better, and don't expect them to do the first step, but do the first step yourself. So, for example, if you want to move towards Scrum, probably it's worthwhile if you organize the backlog and say, does it help if you have that kind of detail and that kind of things to discuss? Don't even call it something special, but suddenly they might really feel the benefit of having documented what they want to do, and suddenly you have done a first change. Then you can go on reasoning and explaining where you want to go, and suddenly ideas will come.
So how do you build that sense of urgency, though? In the case of there's no economic to do it or a market need to do it.
I would say it's a bit a sense of enthusiasm. If you gain a benefit, if you see that learning makes you better, it's a bit like in sports. If you go for training and exercise and you feel that it's really doing something for you that makes you feel better, then the urgency is not so extremely needed. It's more the joy of having something that works and is better, and that's as well part of Agile. So if you can activate this positive energy, it's as well a good starting point.
Okay.
I could like to add to this.
Please.
I think what helps here is the valuation of the proposal. So in other words, people don't resist change for the sake of resisting. If you win $1 million today, it's a huge change, and probably no one is going to reject it because people understand the value. If they don't understand the value and you come strongly across denying what they have worked so hard and what they established so far as a good practice, then you're going to be slowing down significantly. So, you know the mantra, sometimes to go faster, you have to go slower to allow people to observe and consider the value of the proposition. So to build the awareness, what this may provide, and then make it also explicit that it does not mean that you're changing and throwing away everything. You're simply adapting to a situation in which maybe you will keep 98%, but you will only experiment with 2% what to do differently, and that would be a great success, as it is in the case of, the DNA difference between us and monkeys, right? 2% difference between DNA in monkeys and in humans. So finding the 2% with which to experiment should belong to the people and should not bring to the denial of their prior success.
And I agree with that. I think, and I'm guilty early on of doing our first Agile adoptions and just blasting, the waterfall standard that we had, and basically, prescribing the fact that, why would you have to be, an idiot to be using this old methodology. And, and I remember those days clearly, that it wasn't the best approach to encouraging people to go try something.
Yeah, that's why, sometimes when we train for, Scrum or other Agile methodologies, we forget to spend enough time talking about the 5 Scrum values and the 2 principles, right? And if you have a meaningful conversation around those values, and people agree with those values, the next challenge you will have is how do you help them to change their behavior to match the values?
Right.
Which is
right.
really a great definition of adaptive challenge. Every time you have a gap between behavior and the values which people profess, then you have the adaptive challenge.
I wanted to kind of reiterate what you said about diving in too fast and being too enthusiastic. I've had the same experience where I spent a year banging my head against the wall until I realized that I was trying to push too much too fast. And I did figure out what that 2%, what little game can I try to kind of get everybody on board. And once I did that at the first of the year. This particular group, now all of a sudden, they're full steam ahead. It took them a couple months, and they started seeing the benefits. So I think it depends, which I've had a couple different teams, but this particular team, it wasn't change they were trying to avoid. It was don't get in our way. We're already working.
Right. Sometimes these jobs, of transformation feel like a bonus job to some people. It's like we're already busy. And we can't see through it. I forget who had this. What presenter had the slide where it had this Lego guys, pushing a cart with square wheels, and it says, "Don't bother us, with that new round wheel because we're too busy here."
Yeah, one more thing I just want to add. I think if the organization is very large, and if the organization also has a lot of legacy processes which they have built over several decades, I think the reason for change, if it is not very compelling, they may take very long time to change. I mean, unless, for example, as shown in that question, if they are not under any extreme economic or market stresses, then they may not have enough reason to make the change. So the change can be very slow, and it can take several years.
I fully agree with that. I hate to pull things back to Intel because I did spend way too long in my life there. But I had the privilege of working with Andy Grove, and he was notoriously good at not building complacency in the organization. So always a sense of urgency of we've taken this hill, we need to go move to the next. And so leadership, I do believe, has to get involved to help the transformation along about saying that, hey, we cannot remain where we're at right now. And if we do, the decisions that we made 5 years ago, which is contributing to our current success, we need to start making those decisions today that will change the way that our next 2 to 3 years of success comes out. Cynthia, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, the best transformation at a large company that I participated in was when management definitely supports it and dictated it in some way, and they also reorganized properly. I mean, there's 2 basic ways, like either you organize based on project, or if you want long-term success, you organize based on maybe capability, like what each team owns so that they can work relatively independently, and then how you're going to manage larger projects and programs that go across multiple teams. And they sort of figured that out. And then the other thing that they did was they did hire a super top-notch Agile coach, because I liken the transition to Scrum to the same way as trying to get into shape. So, you can start working out and like you see a little bit, but most people, like after their New Year's resolution, go back to their evil, eating or drinking or exercising ways. So coaching for, a quarter or something like that, not that they're full-time watching over you, but watching all of the teams and helping make sure that the transition is successful and people keep their agile mindset rather than going back to the old mindset. Because I worked at Intel too. Hi, Darius. I heard you. I feel that the biggest blockers are the people that you think should be the supporters, like the project managers or people who are vested in the old ways and have job titles and reputations that make them an expert in the old way. You need to take that into consideration. So you either have to organize and rip off the Band-Aid and bring people in to keep people focused on agile versus waterfall or whatever it is that they were doing before, the PLC that they were using before, and show them the differences. Like this guy that came when I was at another company, he would have lunch and learns where we would play games and do all these things to help illustrate the mindset. So we went back to our teams as scrum masters or whoever we were better at adapting. And I think that's really important. And I've seen very few companies who will spend the time and money. You just can't send people to one class and expect them to come back and be agile, and especially a whole group when you really haven't thought about how are you going to manage projects? What are you going to do? How are you going to manage programs? How are you going to charge back? All of these things have to be worked out. Not all of them up front, but enough of them up front so that when you bring it up, it's not a surprise and it's easy to discuss and answer. Because as we stated before, Scrum is an app development method or a product. It's not really project or product management. So some of those things have to be taken into account in an extremely large organization, or it's going to be really rocky and they're going to fall back to their waterfall ways.
Fully agree, except for one thing that you said, the evils of drinking. I love water. Water's good. I encourage people to drink those every day.
Okay, so so you didn't really need a New Year's resolution to get into shape, huh?
No. Again, you don't drink water, it's not good. So are we done with this question? Do we want to pivot? Or do we have some other people who want to add to this? Any closing thoughts?
Just one final point, Steve Denning here, Ray, is that just the assumption that there are lots of companies out there not under economic or market stress. I mean, I don't come across many companies like that these days. And listen to the business news and analysts when get the sense that people who are actually looking out what's going on in the marketplace are aware that every company is under threat these days. Every company is under stress. And often winning support for Agile is less about explaining the case for Agile, but more about saying, well, what are the problems you are confronting? What are the difficulties you're facing? And then showing how what you're thinking about in Agile actually responds to the problems that the executives have. But I really come across a lot of worried executives out there, not people who are confident that they have everything nailed and everything under control. They're worried about where the next disruption is going to come from.
And that strategic thinking, I think, is vital in it. The tactical success of any companies that they're having today, it's, again, the current success has nothing to do with the decision I made today. It had to do with everything with the decision I made a year past.
So I observed really 3 different triggers of people going into Agile. Number 1 is crisis, which really comes from external circumstances. The company is in trouble and they have to do something. If not, they are going to go under. There is another one, which is kind of an internal, hitting the bottom. The developers are so bored or so desperate that they know they hit the bottom and they have to do something, even if they are not in trouble financially. And then they would go to Agile. But then there's the third one, which I think many people mentioned here, is a facilitating environment in which this organic growth happens because people have good advice, coaching, they learn and they observe. As an example, I would tell you that we run a really crazy experiment by showing the people in school district, the teachers, what can be done, but not even telling them much about what the Scrum Master does, what are the roles and artifacts, telling them, and if you would like to know more, we'll tell you. You can come and observe. And as they started reaching for this, that really worked beautifully for them, right? They immediately almost invented themselves those roles with their students, and they started reaping the benefits. And then they accelerated like crazy. Not because they had to, but because they were interested, because the environment was facilitating this.
So there's an ad hoc question. I'm just going to throw it into the mix here. Somebody typed it into the message box. How do you incorporate a regular backlog grooming with a Kanban methodology?
Yeah, I actually do it kind of like as a ceremony once a week. So the group I work with isn't software development, they're infrastructure. So at least the one is, and they don't use sprints per se, but they do have a standard release that they've now shortened from quarters to monthly. So doing it weekly seems to work really well with that kind of duration because they usually have enough to keep them going for that month. But as little things drop in on a weekly basis, we're grooming them. So as that work, the old work moves out, we're still doing the work in progress and we're still moving along.
Yeah, I can add one thing on that. So when teams start using Kanban from Scrum, one thing that they are really going to miss is the cadence that Scrum has. Right, so they miss that regular demos or regular planning sessions. So what I have done on a couple of my projects is to bring in that cadence. Okay, so have that backlog grooming probably every week or every alternate week, depending on how much grooming is needed. So that kind of helps the team not to ignore some of these activities.
One other thing you might want to read is there's a great, I think it's a white paper. It actually probably has been turned into a book by now, but it was about Scrumban, which is how to kind of intermix a couple of the important rituals into Kanban. I've used kind of that variant over the years, and specifically if you want to run a retrospective on an ongoing basis, Scrumban basically says that we go intermix the rituals, put them on a post-it note, and throw them up onto the backlog when we think we need to do things like run a retrospective or refill the backlog or groom the backlog. Just make it a part of the process that you're already following versus having to go do something sort of ad hoc on the side. So with that, the next question is up here. What are the deliverables of an Agile coach versus the deliverables of a Scrum Master? Which is an interesting question because I've always questioned what's the relevance of having both. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there and see, does anyone want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I can echo your sentiment. For me, it's more a title to highlight either one of the aspects of really knowing the process or being more able to help the team. But actually, for me, the deliverables are always do it right and get the impediments removed and be helpful, regardless of what the title is, to put it simply. And then learn as you go, as you expect the team to learn.
You have to keep in mind during a transformation that we're developing Scrum Masters. They're brand new often to their roles, and so that is the situation where you have an Agile coach working with the Scrum Master, enabling the Scrum Master to work with the team on their deliverables. So the Agile coach, they don't have a deliverable, but rather are coaching the Scrum Master so that they can work with the team. So there is times where you have both in place because Scrum Master just doesn't have the experience to be effective.
And Brian, did you have something to add?
Well, so I've always said, by the way, how you doing, Ray?
Hey.
The short way I've always said it was the Agile coach's deliverable is more to facilitate the organization's Agile transformation, where the Scrum Master's deliverable is to facilitate the teams that they're working with. I know that there's not going to be a black and white distinction across the board because Scrum Masters are Agile coaches and and vice versa. But I think the other part that we tend to forget in this is Agile coaches help cover areas where Agile is being implemented without Scrum, right? Where the question makes the assumption that the organizations that are working with an Agile mindset are using Scrum. And while I think the last version 1 report said that that's 58 or 59% of us, that's still 40% that's not.
Do you also believe within the context of just Scrum versus an Agile coach, I at least see that Scrum masters tend to be more of a part-time role, where an Agile coach tends to be more of a full-time role within organizations, at least what I've seen?
I think it's going to depend. I've started to see more where you've got a Scrum Master that may have 1 or 2 additional organizational responsibilities, usually like around reporting or analytics, that fall kind of outside of just the traditional facilitating the team. But what I've seen more of recently is Scrum Masters just getting more teams, like the organizations not wanting to invest in a Scrum Master team, but making sure that the Scrum Masters they hire can handle multiple teams as opposed to just assigning them part-time roles on a larger team.
Okay, so it's sort of the formal Scrum Master job role then in that case. And what I've seen is with one Scrum Master, by the way, as the one for all teams. The only disadvantage of that is that I know that my talents are good in certain aspects of product delivery, but bringing in a new Scrum Master that has a different set of skills and rotating those people around, I found that to be incredibly valuable. Because I think the team should be learning from the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master is not an admin, is not a data reporter type of position. It's a coaching role. And once they've coached the team to the point where they don't really need a Scrum Master anymore, it's good to rotate another person through and that might be able to help them with their technical practices or help them to inject new patterns that they've never tried before.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I've seen one development organization actually, where they renamed by purpose all the Scrum Masters into Agile coaches just to put a focus for a certain time on coaching the teams in really growing. So it was an intentional decision to talk about something different than Scrum Masters for them, just to make a change that inspired people to look at the aspect that they found most valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Another point, if I may, would be that in the ideal state, you would have no Scrum Master because your team is self-organizing. Because Scrum Master is really about the process of Scrum. But you may need a great need for Agile practices. It could be test-driven, behavior-driven design, etc. And there will be practices, there will be other issues which are not Scrum process related, right? And if people are self-organizing, then the role is just supportive, right? You don't need it. They already understand and they are guided by the principles and the values. But still, the practices will need some attention.
Hi, Ray. It's Sean here from the UK. How are you?
Hey, Sean. Good to hear you.
Thank you. I was just going to add, actually, that where I see fantastic Scrum Masters is where they truly act as change agents and they go beyond the level of their focus on the team. And a lot of the organizations I've worked in, yes, there's initial focus on the team to bring them up to a level where they're running those good processes which Scrum brings. But I often find that a lot of the problems that are affecting the team are usually at the middle management kind of level. And I think that's where a really good Scrum Master then will start sort of morphing into that kind of coaching role. But what I do find is where there's a good Agile coach to sort of like bring them on that journey at the same time is very advantageous. But for me, that's just a natural thing for a Scrum Master to do. Just picking up on some of the comments as well, I often see that good Scrum Masters, they have one, maybe two teams. And But great Scrum Masters usually have one team or two teams. Any more than that, it gets very difficult for them. But I think the key thing is that they understand that their role is just more than just at a team level, and because the problems could be a lot wider than that. And my worry is with some Scrum Masters that they solely focus on team level and not the wider issues that are affecting the team.
Sure, and let me add to that, because you bring up a really valuable point. Most of the inhibitors, impediments that teams are dealing with, some of these become organizational-wide impediments. They're not something that's at the team level, as you were saying. And having a person who's senior enough to the organization in the Scrum Master role becomes vital, because they're going to have to go work with those middle managers or senior managers or even executives within the company to go remove that impediment. And what we find is sometimes and I've been into many organizations where the person who's the Scrum Master is new to the company. And I find it hard for that individual who's not networked in to be able to effectively remove those impediments. It's almost impossible for them to do.
That's where you need to build up those relationships with your team very quickly, so you can understand, who can you go to start removing those impediments. But it's all about stakeholder management and relationship building then as well. And I think if you can get that kind of trust and two-way relationship working with the senior management teams or middle management teams, then that really does pave the path going forward then to really help your teams and grow your teams.
So one of the things that I've seen here recently, I work in an organization where we're transforming traditional project managers into Scrum Masters, and they do pretty well on their first about 18 months of Scrum Mastery, because they're working with newer teams and going through the more mechanical side of the transformation, and that usually flows well from their project management roots, right? Making sure the cadence gets established, doing those things, making sure everybody stands on time, making sure everybody stands in the stand-ups. Then as they work to develop the team's kind of deeper understanding, they struggle with trying to develop the deeper understanding of Agile thinking in the organization as the team grows. So I think that there's a balance there of between Agile coaching and Scrum Master. Scrum Masters often have that growth and development path that an Agile coach should have probably already gone through.
I mean, just closing thoughts wise, number one, and I'm just going to throw it out there. Can we please get rid of master, please? That just has so many bad connotations in my brain. So I would hope, and I had a conversation with Jeff Sutherland a long time ago about this, and since it's still sticking out there, I would like it to be Scrum Coach, someone who's focused on, implementation of Scrum and its rituals and the artifacts associated with Scrum. And then the Agile coach being the person who is more focused on, one, they can understand Scrum, they understand what it is, and it's sort of a higher position within the company that's also looking at more organizationally, or as some of you had said, kind of organizational wide, how do I glue together 5 Scrum teams or 20 Scrum teams or more, and dealing with those higher levels. So the next question, where is the line between modifying Agile frameworks and practices to meet the needs of your current environment and ignoring Agile values and principles? So what's that line of, okay, we've modified these things to the point where they are almost Agile or maybe even violating the Agile values itself. Is this right?
I mean, the key thing in my experience has been mindset, that if you have the right mindset, then it hardly matters whether you're modifying frameworks and practices or adjusting the values and principles, that you're understanding the context and dealing with it interactively. And so you shouldn't be taking the frameworks and practices fixed or the values and principles as some kind of diktat from on high, but rather seeing, given the context we're in, how does agile mindset approach these kind of problems? So I think it's a kind of a false opposition, if you like, between the two.
Well, I'm picking on the part of this where it says ignoring agile values and principles. And Brian Rain, this is your question, dude, and you're on the call, so you're welcome to come in here and kind of defend this question a bit.
So I'm at an organization that is not just a long-term traditional development organization, but they're well recognized for that, for those processes and methodologies. And from that, they've developed a culture of doing it our way. And so part of the Agile transformation that I'm currently working on is, okay, we need to do Agile, but we need to do it our way. And so I often get myself into, I don't have people, I'm developing the Agile mindset from trying to develop a critical mass in the organization. I'm not there yet. So where's the balance during a growth and development phase? Maybe it might be a better add-on to that question.
Okay. Well, let me give so the values and principles, if you read through them, are there any of those that say to your company, boy, business people and developers shouldn't work together daily? That's crazy talk. Are there certain values in there that just don't mix with your company at all?
Ray, is Sean again here. I'm in an organization at the moment where I try and use the leverage of the teams I work with to display all the good values and the mindset aspects that Steve already alluded to. The problem I have at the moment is that we have got some Scrum Masters there at the moment who come from a very traditional project management background, and they're slipping back into the old ways, and they don't see the benefits of some of the principles that I really stand for, which is, for example, holding a retrospective. Very important aspect of the Scrum process, in my opinion, because that's where the learning needs come out of the team, and where the team can actually commit to those learning needs going forward, so they can make a difference and improve their overall efficiency. Now, I'm seeing cuts in that. I've seen these particular Scrum Masters not. They haven't had a retro for 2, 3, 4 sprints, and the teams are starting to hurt from that. But the mindset is not there because nobody speaks up. And I'm trying to use my influence and use the leverage of my teams to show what I think is good. There might be obviously split an opinion on that, but we as a team think is good. And what I'm recognizing is that these other teams, or the members of the teams, say, yes, we like what Sean's teams are doing, but they haven't got the courage to actually challenge the status quo. So I think Steve raises a very interesting point. It is very good to get, for me, get the mindset right and get those teams in a zone where they can challenge that status quo, but in an effective way. So yeah, for me, if they start dropping things like retrospectives where they can't continuously improve because they've solely focused on delivery only, I think that is a road to disaster.
Maybe I've seen something like this in one company where I've been part of a transformation, and actually there was quite a split actually going along locations where one part was actually trying out the exact method as prescribed by Scrum and just trying to see. A lot of thousands of people have tried this, so there might be some wisdom in it. Let's try before we modify. And the others, they said we modify immediately because we know better. And actually, guess who failed? But one reason behind this, and I see it in this question as well, is that it doesn't help to follow the procedure. This doesn't give you the mindset anyway. So if the mindset is not, I want to learn from others and I'm willing to change, then following a framework will just change my routine, but not my way of working. And that's one thing you need to challenge. Agile is not a benefit in itself. It's not something other people can bring to you or your organization. And be humble and try what others have succeeded with before you think you can do it better. Nobody would do that trying to go to do, and just again the example, professional sports and say, I exactly know how the movements are and I can do it better without ever getting taught. It's strange that people do think they can do this to methods they haven't even tried.
Well, and in particular, I think it's sort of like servicing your own car and suddenly deciding, hey, the carburetor's not really needed because I don't know what it does. I do believe that people need to practice, and how they practice, I don't think is as vital as just their ability to be able to understand what they're trying to strive for. Because Scrum practiced in an old mindset just becomes more of a micromanagement tool than anything. Kevin, you had your hand up. Do you want to add something to this?
Really, as soon as you started into this question, I had the question right away. Does anyone have an example? Because I wasn't quite making the link between the modification of Agile frameworks and practices versus ignoring values and principles, because to me the two were separate and distinct. So, one was environmental versus one was more mind shift mindset and the way we operate as a team. And right. So I didn't know if they were trying to say, individual innovation and creativity. What happens when individual ideas from an innovation creativity perspective come to mind, and it's not a team-based event or something. I was trying to draw a correlation between these. So if anyone had an example of what they're actually seeing.
I can give you one directly, which is, and I've seen this with, since we talked about Scrum Masters last, Scrum Masters who are more from a project management background tend to be more project leaders and leading a project versus, helping to get self-organization up within the organization. They tend to, they'll lead with that way versus I'm going to stand back and allow the team to self-organize around this problem. And if they're not self-organizing, what can I do to bring and help that out of them? So that'd be the difference between using a pattern of Scrum in a way that without the Agile principles and values in place, I might not let it self-organize.
I can give you another one. If somebody asked the product owners to provide a list of which developer works on which work package on a weekly basis, and otherwise he still thinks he can follow the Scrum method, there is quite a significant contradiction.
Yeah.
But it has happened.
Okay. Interesting. Our organization, there's a lot of talk about Scrum, and I'm not a real Scrum expert by any stretch of the imagination. We've, as an organization, have adopted disciplined Agile delivery. Mm-hmm. So from, talking about the team lead role versus the coach's role, product owner, architect owner, and definitely from the conversation previously around the roles, to me, it's more of a role than a deliverable perspective from the Agile coach and the team, what we call the team lead. So I definitely, see the difference between those roles and how they plug into the organization and the expectations currently of those roles. But again, we're evolving. We're still in early days, right? So I'm hearing from a lot of people sort of what the next stage evolution looks like, and self-organizing teams. Right now, we're just trying to get teams to run Agile, right? Which is a great thing to do. And so as we're looking across the enterprise and we're trying to modify various practices and procedures and governance and everything around Agile as well. And that's kind of what I was reading into this question. As we're making modifications across the enterprise, are we ignoring in any way the Agile values and principles? Are we ignoring that?
I think it's a valuable question to bring up when you actually are modifying it, and that is coming back to the question: Have we modified it so far that we're not in fact being agile any longer? Ruth, did you have something to add?
Yeah. I mean, the comment of, the product owner is asking for detailed information about what developers specifically are working on, and, does that violate Agile values and principles? Whenever anyone is disrupting the current process or asking for things that don't make sense, it always begs the question, why, have a conversation. Why do they need this? What value is it going to give them? And so that you can look at the Agile values and principles and see if there truly is a violation, or is the request in support of something related to that. Sometimes people are asking for information and developing reports that are no longer useful because things have changed and they haven't changed. So sometimes it's about eliminating waste and redefining how we do work, but people don't change on their own sometimes. They need to be led there. But we do always need to ask why. Why do they need this information? What is it going to be used for? Don't just spit it out and supply it because there may not be a real use for it.
Fully agree on that. And there's a lot of systems that just were in place for a number of years, and the reason why people continue to execute on it is because that's the way we've always done it, and that's always troublesome.
Yeah, I would like to add that we often have hard time, I noticed, to distinguish between principles and rules. And what I would say here is that rules are for children, right? When they really don't understand yet, then you apply rules. And then principles are more generic, and they are for adults, for people who are mature enough to make a judgment. And they are guiding beacons, right? If I arrive to a situation where the values of Scrum, the 5 values, for example, of Scrum, are being jeopardized or invalidated, I think I would run like hell, because it's not a good sign. It will go against the core of the system of beliefs here. Those values are not business oriented. They are purely attached to what humans do and how they do things well. And it would be, in my judgment, a flagrant violation of humanity.
Oh, interesting. That's you took it all the way to humanity. I didn't expect you'd go that far with it, but I do agree with you on it, because
focus
for a humane system,
Focus, openness, respect, commitment, and courage. I think these are the rules for humans to live peacefully together and care for the common good, right? Which one would be in violation of this?
That's very true. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had one last comment, because someone did comment about the product owner understanding, I believe, who was working on certain things. But, I found, from our perspective with our rollout of Discipline Agile, the product owner shouldn't be asking that, because they should already know there should be full transparency of all work being undertaken by the project team. And it doesn't matter if you're an architect owner, team lead, or product owner, or a team member, you should understand or be able to see all work that's currently being done and by whom. So there should be full transparency. They shouldn't have to ask, in my opinion.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. So we are at the top of the hour, everyone. This has been a great call. I think thank everyone for their participation today. We are going to be on 2 Agile coaching networks for 1 month. I apologize. I was just at the XP event over in Portugal, and then before that, there was another event. And so it's kind of messed up the schedule of every 3rd Friday, which would be beautiful if we could maintain that. But I think it was important to just have the call. So next meeting is going to be on the 15th. I look forward to having you all there. Also, if you guys, any of you, if you're at Agile Testing Days, I will be there for that session in Boston. I'd look forward to seeing you guys. If you're there, look me up. as well as we're getting close to Agile 2018, so the big event that's going to be happening in San Diego. So please, if you're going to be there as well, we're going to try to get a Agile coaching network special kind of either a lunch or maybe a drinks after the main day or whatever it might be. I'm trying to get something arranged for you guys who are part of the ACN to basically get there and to participate there. We'd love to have you at the event and love to be able to sit down and have a face-to-face conversation. Maybe we record this live with a bunch of people, which would be incredibly fun. And with that, so we're going to close for today. Thank you guys all for your participation once again.
This podcast is provided by the Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.